evening and welcome to the NDTV Dialogues, a conversation of ideas. This week we mark the second anniversary of the tragic gang rape and murder of the young woman who came to be known as Nirbhaya. But the real tragedy is that even today there are so many Nirbhayas, and that doesn't seem to be stopping. Where does the real issue lie? Is it just about laws? Is it about implementation? Is it change in mindset? How do we look at tackling this problem going forward? Joining me for more on that is the former Delhi Chief Minister, Sheila Dikshit. I'm also joined by Pinky Anand, now Additional Solicitor General. Also with me, Atishi Marlena of the Aam Aadmi Party and Kishwar Desai, author whose books have also featured on sexual violence. Thank you all very much for coming in. Ms. Dikshit, you had the luxury of being away from being in the thick of it. You've been able to observe as well since the time you stepped down what's actually happening. What do you attribute the fact to that despite the fact that Parliament managed to introduce a very strict new law in record time, there was a Justice Verma committee, there was a greater awareness that came out. Why is it that we still see incidents of rape being reported every day? I mean, not one, but across the country, several.
Look, I'll tell you one thing. You can have laws, you can have vigilant policing, you can have all kinds of, punishments. And of course, the outcry in the Nirbhaya case was one time when everybody just came out on the streets because everybody felt so anguished. But it's not stopped. You're absolutely right. And I am a firm believer on one thing, having seen this whole thing in the past 2 years, that policing or having 181 is a helpline which we set up. Very good. It has about 79,000 calls which have come in these years, where distress calls, and things happening inside homes, girls being stalked, telephone calls, etc. Then also, as you mentioned, the Verma committee. But all these are only one side of the thing. How much policing can you do? I believe in one thing, that if you want to bring about a change, the society has to become a part of that change. Unless, and I'm quoting Mahatma Gandhi's ethos, that if you want to see a change, become a part of that change. And I think the time has come when we have all together to become a part of that change, because as you very correctly said, it hasn't come down. It hasn't deterred anybody, in spite of the fact that you have, fast courts. And I think there's a death penalty also for this now.
In the Nirbhaya case, they've all got the death penalty, but it clearly isn't acted as a deterrent, yes.
Yes, that is why I insist, and I've been going through this because it was a very traumatic experience for everybody. It could happen to anybody. I remember the time when we never used to feel worried roaming around Delhi on a bicycle or just going by oneself. Now I feel scared if my granddaughter comes and says she's coming back from a dance class at about 8:30, 10, and that she's coming by scooter. I really get petrified.
But that statement was very controversial because when you made it to your chief minister, when you said, my daughter doesn't feel safe coming home at night, and many asked, well, if our politicians are saying this, then what is the state of it?
That's why I said this. That's why I said it's not just the duty of the police or the, the services or the officers or whatever you may call it. It has to be a change. The society wants to see a change. We want to protect our vulnerable section of society, that is young girls and women. We have to, if we want to do that, then we have to bring about some change in the society that we have and the way society looks at the vulnerability of women.
Pinky, one immediate fallout, and I think Ms. Dikshit pointed to the awareness which came after the Nirbhaya case, and we saw so many people coming out in the streets. Many, in fact, say that that was one of the factors that brought down the Congress in Delhi, was that huge outpouring. The Modi government, and one of the main campaign slogans was about how this time under a Modi Sarkar, that women won't have to worry anymore. Now, of course, there's campaign rhetoric and promises, but people are asking that what is the change? That perhaps when political parties took on Mrs. Dikshit and said you can't guarantee a safe Delhi, can any political party, can the BJP do it? Because so far that doesn't seem to have happened.
No, so, see, no government anywhere. Why BJP or Congress anywhere in the world? I mean, you have crimes happening everywhere, you have laws everywhere, you have societal conflicts everywhere. So these kind of aberrations, if you call it, or crimes, these are going to continue. You can't stop it.
No,
you
but
can't stop
aberrations. They're happening all the time.
No, I agree with you. The point still remains that you are having the situation happening, and believe me, initially when the laws were changed after Nirbhaya, I personally thought that they would have a deterrent effect, and I agree with Mrs. Dikshit that it just didn't happen. On the contrary, in fact, there's been a rise. Since 2012, there's been a rise in crimes. I think that is to do with perception, knowledge, information and communication and reporting. A lot is due to that. I don't know how to figure out this entire analysis, but on the face of it, it's apparent. Because people today are going to police stations. You are having even from villages, you are having from UP, you are having from God-forsaken places, you are having reporting of crimes, you are having children crimes being reported. So therefore, there is this entire awareness situation, and when society is going through a transition, aside from the fact that, again, I cannot disagree with Mrs. Dikshit when she says attitudes have to change and societies to become part of the change, but the fact that people are coming forth is itself a big symbolic situation leading towards a decrease at the end of the day. So, you have systems into place, you have societies forming of various aspects, and again, policing is one of it. If you have more CCTV cameras, if you have more lighting in public places, you have people who are actually marshals, for example, as suggestions.
But you're also now as ASG, you're also in the prosecution part of it. So you've seen the judicial impact really.
Yes.
So what do you find that there's actually been any change? We talk about fast track courts, but we've seen that even now rape victims have to often wait months for hearings. They have to repeat the case. Do you find as ASG, because that's such a crucial job being a prosecutor, that things are moving faster? Is there a mindset even amongst the judiciary?
The mindset appears to be there, but it's very latent. It hasn't manifested itself in any direct fashion. It's not as if you can say that today there's a rape case and there will be a conviction in, let's say, not say 3 months or 6 months or whatever the period quickest that there can be. The only time that really rape cases were tried very fast was 3, as far as I know, till date. One was Rajasthan, and Rajasthan, of course, there was more than one case. One was Ajmer, one was Udaipur, happened in 21 days, 3 months. Then the Bombay, the Marine Lines case, which happened in 7.5 months. And of course, then the Nirbhaya case, which had a major follow-up. But that was really because of public outcry, not because of there was a systemic change. Yes. For that matter, I mean, the Nirbhaya funding which has to go in, the centers that have to be set up, there is a time lag which needs to be corrected and rectified, definitely. But you're right that speedy justice by itself is equally important, if not more important, than laws being amended. So we have amended the laws, made them more stringent, but until you deliver, you have anybody talks, you have somebody out there. If, like the Uber situation happened, you had the person being at least arrested, people feel vindication. And that is what is most important in this entire situation.
Atishi, the BJP now in the hot seat. We talked about Mr. Modi's slogan, the Congress in the same situation 2 years ago. Even AAP is now promising. In fact, there was a very controversial poster we had of Arvind Kejriwal on auto rickshaws at the time when he was fighting against Ms. Dikshit, where he basically said that, rapes will stop if I come into power. And it was a controversial poster. There was some angst about that, I think Mrs. Dikshit felt as well. Is women's safety now being used very cynically as an election promise? Because basically, Pinky Anand, you did say that no government can assure women's safety. So is it being used very cynically as an election promise?
Actually, I don't agree with that, actually. I think the fact is that it's not as if governments can't ensure it. Yes, of course, social attitudes need to change, mindsets need to change, but we cannot wait as on today for mindsets to change. The changing of mindsets can take up to decades. The question of law and order needs to be answered now. Accountability in terms of law and order needs to be fixed now. Last mile connectivity, safe last mile connectivity needs to be ensured for women now. So I think that this question that, yes, of course, mindsets will change and we will work towards public education. But I think political will on this questions of women's safety is missing. Because, yes, when an outrage happened, as it happened in the case of Nirbhaya, people got out in the streets, it forced the political class to take action. And yet, once that was over, no fast-track courts were made, no substantial difference was made in terms of public transport, no substantial difference was actually made even in terms of public education on the matter. So I think the political class does have to answer these questions. And I don't think we can get away by saying that we have to wait for mindsets to change. And yes, Congress was in the hot seat and BJP is now. And I think both these political parties, and if we come into power, then us as well, need to be held accountable on this question of law and order.
Kishwar, come in, because you've actually seen the Indian experience and the British experience. Is it a rape a law and order issue?
I think it partly is, But it is partly, and I have to say this, a political issue. And I think all three parties sitting here have used it at some stage or the other as a political issue. I think let's just look at the representation that they have of women, for example, within their parties. And I do hold AAP responsible because they were actually the new kid on the block. And we were expecting many more women representatives in their party because the other parties are much older. So, you start with that. You look at UK politics. You look at politics all over the world, where in the progressive nations, even in the US and so on, you will find that there is large representations of women who are there. They are there in all public areas. You can see them. They're very visible. I think it's the visibility of women in positions of power and authority which needs to be emphasized. And that's what happens in the UK, because women are they're very important, they're taking decisions, and that makes a difference because then men begin to look upon them as equals. And I also have to say they're very aggressive about it. There is no sense of shame there. If you are being sexually harassed or something is happening, you go out there and you ask for recourse. So I think somewhere along the line, those messages go out. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen there. Yes, rape takes place there. Yes, there is molestation. Yes, there are all those things. But the police is held accountable. There is a huge sense of outrage which pushes people into taking the right steps there, the government to take the right steps, which is even it can be a very small case to a large case. So I'm saying that this whole idea of feminism actually works, whereas I'm afraid out here it's merely lip service.
The irony, of course, then, Ms. Dikshit, is that in Indian politics, though the numbers may not be large, and visibility-wise, women have been well represented. We've got your case, we've had Mayawati as a chief minister, Mamata Banerjee, but often you've heard your critics say that a woman chief minister hasn't changed anything for women. Why is that? In fact, even in this Nirbhaya case, the issue was about, some of the statements made that you lacked sensitivity. When the Soumya Viswanathan case happened, again, a statement of yours was taken as insensitive. Do you agree that having more women in public life will actually make a difference? And do you feel that women politicians have perhaps not delivered in being more sensitive towards women?
Look, I'll tell you one thing. I am the one who suffered the onslaught of this Nirbhaya case. We really got it because we were there. And even though it could be an excuse that we had nothing to do with law and order, it's the police that way. But we got it. And we, really got it badly. Apart from that, it hurt us very badly.
Do you think you would have lost your election to Arvind Kejriwal if it hadn't been for
Yes,
Nirbhaya?
one of the reasons was that. Now, as I had mentioned earlier on, we set up this 181 helpline, and it's got about 79,000 odd cases. Do you know all the cases, or majority of them, madam, that's for you, are rapes taking place in the house. You and I get to know through the media of the rapes that have taken place in a taxi or a bus or outside in a tonga or wherever it may be. It's the public rape which has taken place. But what worries me even more than that is the fact that many women come, and this helpline opened both our eyes and our ears to the fact that the telephone calls were from domestic rapes and domestic violence. Now that is why I am saying, and I plead, that we have to have a change in attitudes. If you want to bring a change, let's change ourselves first. And I do think that more women in public life perhaps will make a difference, but I cannot really say because there are many more women there were 10 years ago.
But we need more.
Much more now than in public life.
The percentage is still very dismal. It's about 10%.
I know. I agree with you there. But you see, look at the media as well as the corporate sector. Look at the heads of, corporate sector now. So women are coming out. It won't happen overnight. It's not a bad...
But is there the insensitivity? Mamata Banerjee after Salt Lake case, some of the statements you made, do you think women politicians, because in a way the winnability, you're not judged as a woman when you fight an election, you stand against a man. So do you feel there should be special focus by women chief ministers on this issue?
Of course there would be.
But the expectation of
but I would say that it should be for all. Yes, why do we take this as a woman against men sort of a, distinction? It has to be there. Perhaps more women coming there in the corporate sector also, all of us here, a lot of things. Our friends tell us, a lot of our acquaintances tell us, that even in the corporate sector where many women are working at very high positions, they face this kind of a situation. So I feel that the law and order needs to be tackled. Maybe more women in public life will make a difference. I can't guarantee that. I couldn't guarantee it myself. I certainly couldn't do it. And also that, you have many more women in the police now. In every thana, there is at least one woman officer, constable or whatever it is. But it hasn't made a difference.
Is that
the media has become very, very vigilant.
No, I don't agree. I think that women constable has made a lot of difference. I find people are far more easy about going to the police stations.
You're right. But that is an assumption that because there's also an impression that rapes haven't stopped. The media has brought them all out.
Figures are not necessarily demonstrative of the fact that
because in fact the Delhi Police Commissioner says 1900 is more reporting. I actually want to get in Pinky and then Ms. Dikshit on the points you'd specifically raised, because I think Atishi was the voice which said, look, it's all very well to talk about mindset and other issues that can change, but what about the specific last mile connectivity? When you say why public rapes are talked about more, because the feeling is that a person can't catch a taxi or a bus home alone. Of course it's terrible, the rapes inside the house, but in a way, the government can't be in the bedrooms, but the government can definitely be out on the roads on lights. And again, Pinky Anand, I come back to you. It's a government which now has been in power for 7 months. Has enough been actually done to change anything? What has changed in terms of women's safety?
No, I don't think enough has been done. I think a lot more needs to be done. And ultimately, it is, as we were talking, it's not really only law, it is not only implementation, it's not only speedy justice, but some of the preventive steps that can be taken, including policing, including, as I was mentioning, CCTV cameras, including public lighting. I think these are very small things, but very significant, including the last mile connectivity of, ensuring, for example, in some of the other states, you had laws that women could not travel back alone and you required to have an escort. I mean, these kind of situations are rather important. One thing is to say that life should be safe, but the second thing is when life is not safe, what to do to ensure that you are not assaulted.
Uber, doesn't it undercut the whole process? If by banning Uber, you've actually made it more difficult for women because you banned all these radio cabs, and how do they get home?
That is a very debatable proposition, as you rightly said. I mean, whether you should ban because a driver is done. The fact, however, is that there was a lapse on the part of the organization to look into the credentials and the verification of the driver. That is something for which a company is liable. By itself, in fact, I was not even in the country when this happened and I heard about it. By itself, it is one thing to say a driver is committed. Now, somebody is committed a rape within an organization. You don't ban the organization.
In fact, a case has taken place, I think, in America as well.
Sure.
And they have not yet banned Uber. I mean, they're going to investigate it.
But really, the point which came in here was, all said and done, that you had the question of the verification by the organization, and they had not even the mobile telephone. I mean, if you look little deeper, there was a little issue. So some kind of lesson for organizations for the institutional responsibility, because it is not A, it is individual, B, political, C, otherwise, but then D, definitely institutional, because it's for an institution to take care of its employees.
No, but Sonia, I think the bigger question, I think, still needs to be answered. I think we cannot get away from the fact that, after all, there has to be political accountability for the question. Yes, we cannot get into people's homes, but there is a public space in which no, let me finish this. There's a public space in which women operate. It's not just an extreme case of an Uber taxi where a woman gets raped. In Delhi, every woman traveling in a DTC bus knows that harassment takes place on an everyday basis. Every woman knows that when they get home after dark, getting home from that bus stop or that metro station is enough to give them and their families high blood pressure.
Mrs. Dikshit says about her own granddaughter.
Absolutely. So what is it that governments have done? What is it that concrete steps that have been taken to actually provide safety in DTC buses? What concrete steps have been taken to introduce last mile connectivity? And not just that.
No, but
something
just
as
answer
simple,
that specific
Just
point.
1 second, one more thing. Something as simple as toilets. 40 lakh people in Delhi don't have toilets.
But that is what has been planned, Atishi. I mean, the
but
government has...
Exactly.
If you're talking about that, just for a moment.
Where are the numbers? I think that is what needs to be answered.
The numbers don't develop yesterday. They are developing now, and it is a concrete plan to take care of this part.
But let us be clear on the fact that the numbers on all of these issues are absolutely abysmal. And I think everyone has to take responsibility for that. And unless we don't, we will be back here again in some time when some other major case has happened and saying, oh, we weren't able to do this or we weren't able to do that.
Ms. Dikshit, go ahead.
I want to ask you one little question. What do you mean by political accountability? I want you to answer that. I think the audience will also like. What do you mean by political accountability?
See, I think in Delhi, as you know, you specifically know the fact that in the case of Delhi, both the Delhi government as well as the central government need to be held accountable. Number one, the central government.
In what way?
Absolutely, let me come to that. The central government, since they control law and order, and the Delhi government because they can introduce many policies. For example, If we see the situation of PCR vans in Delhi, most PCR vans are concentrated in central Delhi. Most of outer Delhi, peripheral Delhi, if one was to do a mapping, the density of PCR vans in central Delhi is very high. If you go to Narela, if you go to Bhawana, you go to Najafgarh, no PCR vans are available.
Who is expanding beyond just Delhi? Because, for instance, say in Uttar Pradesh or say in West Bengal, where rapes
and
happen,
borders.
So that may be a Delhi-specific problem, but political accountability, say, even of a West Bengal chief minister or a Madhya Pradesh chief minister when this happens. For instance, if a rape happens during Arvind's time, we wouldn't necessarily ask for him to step down as chief minister because a rape happened.
The question is that what was done in terms of, like, we talk about fast-track justice, then it's political accountability to ensure more courts are set up. Why aren't chief ministers of different states setting up more courts? Because when we have a law in place, like the law that came after the Verma Committee report, you actually need more courts for fast-tracking to happen. Because the classic problem that happens is you try and fast-track some cases and other cases get slow-tracked. So is it not the accountability of a chief minister to ensure more courts are set up? That is the final, that's where the buck stops.
You don't agree?
I'm afraid I'm not convinced. It's not that I'm not convinced because I'm not convinced of the fact that what you're suggesting is a practical solution. And we have to work towards a practical solution. When I said society, I meant society, I meant the government, I meant the police. The police is there in any case. The courts are also there. They need to be stepped up. They need to be more efficient, quicker disposals. All that is there. But I also feel that society also needs to do it. How will you ask a chief minister, because a rape has taken place in Narela, now you resign? No, please, let's be practical.
I do want to support Mrs. Dikshit in this point because, you know, I've been researching for my books quite regularly. I go out and collect information and data. And what has been worrying me is that, you know, the trend in India over the last few years, as you know, there is a huge gender imbalance, particularly in North India.
Yeah.
And we have not addressed this issue for years and years on end. So what has happened is that there is a gap in the number of men in the visible space versus the women anyway. And it is exacerbated, if you like, made worse by the fact that there is a gender imbalance also. Now, and to add to the fact, you know, we often talk about a demographic dividend. Now, we don't have that. Let's face facts. A lot of these young men are ill-educated, they're ill-informed, they are sometimes even sexually frustrated, they do not have any guidance from anybody within their families or outside, they do not have normal relationships with women. We have to look upon their problem in a more sympathetic and a more empathetic way. We keep on talking about the women, that somehow we have to push the women out there onto the streets, but we also have to, on the other hand, take care of those men. I mean, they are going berserk, if you like that, and they're being used, again, I do refer to all political parties here, they are being used by political parties for political purposes. So I'm saying let us address their problems sympathetically. Let's not just demonize them and say, oh, they're all horrible and terrible. As you said, there is a problem of migration. What happens to them? There's no counseling, there's no looking after of these. So let's also look at that big, huge problem.
And what does happen, I think, is that because it's almost like a pressure cooker situation, it explodes sometimes, like what happened in the Nirbhaya case. But the argument was a good point as well, because in a sense, if you're watching, you must have seen that the same thing happened with Akhilesh Yadav, where it all became all about Akhilesh Yadav and what he did or didn't do, though UP's record, of course, is terrible again in rape cases. But do you find that, I mean, again, as I said, you're not chief minister anymore. Do you regret how it unfolded? Are you wiser in hindsight? Would you have done things differently? And would you actually advise other politicians in your situation that there needs to be we talk about political accountability, we may not agree with Atishi's view, but there does need to be more sense of a political echo of the concerns that are being raised by people on the streets, that
the urgency of the concerns.
That deafness in a sense of, as I said, it's not just about you, but whether it was of a police commissioner, whether it's of a home minister, whether it's of anybody who's involved, whether it's of a chief justice, that deafness is what angered many people.
No, I agree, and it was a moment of great anguish, no doubt about it. And I do feel what we could have done at the immediate, we did it. One was this 1818 line that I have told you, and about 79,000 odd calls have come in. And some distress have been settled because there are vans attached to it also. They go to the place immediately. And most of them are domestic violence, you know, on the street. Though in Delhi there's an advantage, practically everybody has a cell phone. So they're able to ring up. Or there's a thana nearby. And as she said very correctly, you know better, that the presence of a woman constable in every thana has made some difference. Otherwise, even in the thanas earlier on, in the police thanas, there used to be cases of teasing or, you know, women being brushed. There used to be. That has stopped. That has stopped. Now, the other thing is that, and I keep on saying this, is that who are you going to make accountable? Are you going to make the police commissioner or the beat constable, or is it the station leader, or are you going to make the MLA or the MP or the minister?
But people don't have expectations of elected representatives because they don't elect the police commissioner.
No, the one thing that could have been done, and I feel very strongly about it, and I've said it often enough, that at that point of time when the Nirbhaya case took place, one of the gestures that could have been made by the government was to have shunted out the police commissioner. Give him a higher position.
But is that not a meaningless gesture? Especially if you're going to give him a higher position.
It's not a meaningless. It's meaningless in the sense it's not substantial. I agree it's not substantial. But it's an indicator. If she says that you must be punished for it, then who do you punish? The person who is in charge of law and order.
Look at the statements made by minister saying लड़के तो करते ही रहेंगे, ये तो होता ही रहता है, हम भी लड़कियों को छेड़ते थे. I mean, these kind of absurd statements, that is where you need a very heavy political accountability.